Imagine, it's dark on a cool spring night and you're resting peacefully, when all of a sudden you hear an explosion and you look around and finally find the source. You see it came from the Chernobyl power plant. Chernobyl, the disaster that changed lives, the worst of the worst nuclear disasters in history. Many of you may know about Chernobyl, but some of you might not, which is why I will be telling you how it happened, how they addressed it, and why it still affects us today. So what is Chernobyl? The Chernobyl disaster is a nuclear disaster that all happened on April 26, 1986. It happened in present-day Ukraine, but at the time it was underneath the Soviet Union, which collapsed in 1991. It was home to 4 operational RBMK 1000 reactors. According to the article, Chernobyl Timeline, How a Nuclear Accident Escalated into a Historical Disaster by Jesse Greenspan, published by History in 2019, it says that the Chernobyl nuclear power station, located about 60 miles north of Kiev, Ukraine, then part of the Soviet Union, began supplying the power grid. A Soviet Union official is quoted saying that the odds of a nuclear meltdown are 1 in 10,000 years. By this time, the Chernobyl site contained 4 megawatt reactors plus 2 additional reactors that were under construction. So obviously it was close to major cities and it was a very big nuclear power plant and deemed safe, but it was not the case. So the initial explosion happened in reactor 4, and this was the point that it blew up and exposed the core to the atmosphere. And this is the explosion. You can see that it blew basically half of the roof off and exposed the core, which comes to how it happened. So ironically, this all started with the safety test for if they lost power. But this wasn't because of the test. One major factor was that the people running the test were unqualified and uninformed about this test. According to the article Chernobyl Chapter 1, The Site and Accident Sequence, published by the Nuclear Energy Agency in 2002, it states that this type of test had been run during a previous shutdown period, but the results have been inconclusive, so it was decided to repeat it. Unfortunately, this test was considered essentially to concern the non-nuclear part of the power plant, and it was carried out without proper exchange of information and coordination between the team in charge of the test and the personnel in charge of the operation and safety of the nuclear reactor. Therefore, inadequate safety precautions were included in the test programming, and the operating personnel were not alerted to the nuclear safety implications of the electrical test and its potential dangers. So this shows that it was carried out by the non-nuclear part of the plant and that they were not informed about how the test was supposed to run and how they were supposed to do it because they didn't know how dangerous the nuclear power could be. So they ignored the regulation of having at least 30 control rods in out of the 211 to reduce the rate of fission and got the power too low. They took out almost every single control rod, which was major cause for it. But another major cause was that the reactor was faulty and it wasn't designed very well. According to the article Chernobyl Accident 1986, published by the World Nuclear Association in 2005, it states that one of the most important characteristics of the RBMK reactor is that it can possess a positive void coefficient, where an increase in steam bubbles is accompanied by an increase in core reactivity. As steam production in the fuel channels increase, the neutrons that would have been absorbed by the denser water now produce increased fission in the fuel. However, at the time of the accident at Chernobyl, the fuel's reactor burn-up control rod configuration and power led to a positive void coefficient large enough to overwhelm all other influences of the power coefficient. So, which means that the reactor cannot get the core cooled enough if the power is too low, and they had the power below 20%, and so it overheated and created steam, which can cause power surges and increased pressure within the reactor. And that's what finally caused it to explode within seconds, causing another explosion that exposed the granite moderator and the core and destroyed half of the roof. And this is what the control room looked like, very big. So now that they have an exposed reactor and only half of a roof, they have to handle it. So due to the explosion, it started a fire. And that's when the firefighters showed up, and that's what the majority of the immediate deaths came from. And after that, after they put out that fire, a granite fire started. And they didn't know how to address this. So that's when they used helicopters to dump sand, clay, boron, and lead to try to stop the blaze from the fire and limit the radiation coming from it, which is what that helicopter is. And there was a delayed reaction, and they did not start evacuating people until 36 hours after the event because they thought they had it under control. Then months later, they built a concrete sarcophagus around the reactor. In 2016, they finally built a steel containment structure to last 100 years. Then they tried to cover up the faulty reactor cores that were online throughout the Soviet Union, but those were all closed soon after. So Chernobyl has caused a lot of problems for people, and some immediate, but some slow. According to the article, Chernobyl Disaster, published by the editors of Encyclopedia Britannica in 2019, it states that between 50 and 185 million curies of radioforms of chemical elements escaped into the atmosphere, several times more radioactivity than created by the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan. This radioactivity was spread by the winds over Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine, and soon reached as far as West France and Italy. Millions of acres in forests and farmland were contaminated, and although many thousands of people were evacuated, hundreds of thousands more remained in the contaminated areas. So obviously this had a large effect on many areas and was several times more radioactive than the bombs dropped on Japan, which were very radioactive when they were first dropped. So people evacuated, and about 20,000 had to relocate and still live where they couldn't live where they lived when it happened. And the disaster caused 2 workers to die from the immediate explosion, the people running it, and caused 28 more to die in the next 3 months from the acute radiation sickness, which was the majority of the firefighters. But this has affected more than the people who were immediately exposed to it. Mutations and genetic disorders have arisen in people and in animals, which is what these are. This is a fish that has been exposed, and then a moose that has mutation. And this has caused a lot of cancer and infant deaths. And the reactor 4 is now sealed up, and no one's allowed to go in there. In conclusion, Chernobyl was a very bad disaster. It has changed how we view nuclear energy and how we handle it, and it has affected countless lives. And it was all caused by miscommunication and a bad design. That's why people don't want to repeat something like this again.